Olá. Well, I'm going to read what I have written about, and it starts with the title that it is. The thematic was work, and I put work is like trabalho in Portuguese. Well, today is Saturday. Shabbat for the Jews, Samaritans, and certain Christians is the day of rest, of ceasing. To be etymologically more precise, it means a labor strike. Therefore, it's not a passive abstinence of work, but rather an active cessation as omnipotent God's activity on the seventh day of creation according to Genesis. From Exodus, it says, your donkey and your ox will rest. Cadê a nona? Então, where's the animal? Where we see that animals belonging to an observant must also rest on Saturday, not being permitted to transport any kind of a load, not to carry a burden. This is Bruegel's Icaro falling. It has to do with some other things. It's an alchemical, symbolic painting. Yeah. Anyway, it is only to think of work if in a dialectical relationship with its counterpart, the no work. Work in Portuguese is trabalho. It comes from Latin, tripalium, a torture instrument composed of 3 wooden stakes to which the condemned was submitted when not impaled in one of them and left to death. You see what is written there? Yeah, the bendito, good, ser, be, it's in Spanish, I think, the work, el trabajo. You should give thanks to the Senhor, né? This etymon served as a base to link work and suffering, associating the 3 characters involved in the original sin, who had their sentences differentiated. The snake, to crawl over the earth during all its existence. Eve, to suffer in childbirthing and being dominated by her husband. And Adam, to eat bread on the sweat of his face, returning to the ground, for out of it he was taken. This is a Michelangelo. Did you see the painting? The strange painting is Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free, was a cynical, perverted evil placed as a slogan at the entrance of Auschwitz, Dachau, and a number of Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. When I was a child, in the late 30s of the 20th century, in Rio de Janeiro, where I was born, I learned from the books in school, primary school, of history of Brazil, that the indigenous were not good because they did not want to work. That was the speech of the Portuguese colonizers, for whom they were lazy and disqualified. This is a drawing, I don't know, I remember, but I don't remember very well. It's from a book. Actually, until my adulthood, I have never personally met any indigenous of my child built up imagination, not far from Adam and Eve's Eden, almost naked people wearing feathers, out naive natives, for the majority was already assimilated to the urban context. This is a painting by Eckhout when he was in Brazil in 1641. It looks like an Indian, a little too tall, too European in the body, but with the feathers. I had the same idea when I was a child. I might say, though, that there are still some few Brazilians remaining tribes within protected areas throughout the country. This is a very controversial national political item. In the 19th century, in the 1928 Manifesto Antropófago, Cannibal Manifest, the Brazilian modernist writer Oswald de Andrade, he parodied Shakespeare. In which way? Borrowing the name of one of the largest indigenous Brazilian tribes, the Tupi. They were cannibals. You see, they are eating legs, arms, borrowing the name of one of the largest indigenous Brazilian tribes, the Tupi, T-U-P-I, he substituted Hamlet's classical "to be or not to be" for "to be or not to be." That is the question. And he adds, it was because we never had grammars, and we never knew what was urban, suburban, border, or continental. Lazy in Brazil's Mapa Mundi, the world map. I made this series, Native Brazil and Alien Brazil, in the mid-70s, during the Brazilian military dictatorship. It consists of a series of 9 pairs of postcards in color and in black and white. The idea of that work started when one day I saw displayed in a newsstand at the corner of my street some postcards showing indigenous, she and he, from different tribes of Brazil, in poses that impressed me for their apparent well-being of the Indians in their natural contexts. I immediately thought, I immediately bought all these 3 postcards. There are 3 postcards that are already printed before I did this series. You see the Indians, the family, In the back, it's kind of a home that they live, the Hoger. You can see that in the picture. On that very day, the main headline of a newspaper hang up in the same place referred to the devolution by the military of some of the original indigenous territories. That correlation was an evident government propaganda. For months, I kept these 3 postcards, in which, in the back, one could read, Brasil nativo, native Brazil, the respective tribe described, and a name and region of Brazil. Naturally, what? It occurred to me that if there is a native Brazil, there may be another, an alien Brazil. Naturally, would belong to the alien Brazil, the non-natives, such as the Caucasian white like me, the black people brought in a forced diaspora, and the several resulting combinations as the mulattoes, the caboclos, mamelucos, all kinds of people. In that moment, I realized that we, natives and aliens, were all united by something else in our lack of jobs, citizenship, personal and collective freedom, and rights and democracy. We were lame, we were like lumpens, in my disenchanted and pessimistic perspective of the Brazilian society at that moment. Departing from one of the postcards portraying women of a family and their children in front of their home, the Hoger, within the tribe, I began to make comparisons between them and me and my family, depicting the several activities performed by indigenous women and men in cliché situations from the postcards, choosing the mimicry as a visual language in an apparently jocose way. I wanted to demonstrate in these comparisons the impossibility of a strict analogy between our cultures. This you can see, it's me, my family, part of my family. By a coincidence, someone, the one in the middle was someone working in my house, and she was like an Indian, but the culture of the Indians. And this black woman that came to visit me in that day with her child. She was a friend of mine. Coincidence, she arrived in that day. I needed to make a picture with black people. I couldn't go in the street and say, hey, hello, you want to come? And then she showed up. It's everything like that, parazar. To acknowledge and reinforce the perception, I printed in the back of all postcards, on the 18 of the series, this statement written down: with my lack of skill as a primitive man. In Portuguese, I said, com o meu descompasso como homem primitivo. I have had a critical approach regarding any search for false romantic returns to a so-called primitive state of life, not that kind of thing. The photographs of the indigenous were taken from different tribes in the Amazon region and others such as Mato Grosso, central Brazil. These are some of the pairs that I'm going to show, like this woman, sweeping her floor. So I went to the most strange thing. I went to Atlantic Avenue in Copacabana, asked for a sweeper from the garbage, if he could lend me this big thing. And I started sweeping in front of a building to be really a little ridiculous. This beautiful picture of she looking at a mirror that they must have given to her. And I went to a small lake in my school, but I had Caravaggio's figure of Narciso in my mind, and I put this reflection. This one, in which it shows some dance, is, I don't even know what's this dance, and I put the same feathers. And in this one, I put also situations of work, like the woman making the corn and things. They really use this. And myself with a bag from a supermarket, you know, and the supermarket was Mar and Terra, the name of the supermarket, which is the sea and the earth, I mean, in the sack. And this one, also posing as he's working in with an arrow. And that's me. Trying, I have no aim, I don't know. But it is a true, I had it. I like some indigenous species. I had it at home. Okay. These are some of the pairs. The poses were photographed by Luiz Carlos Velho, a Brazilian cinematographer. In some way, I can say I feel very happy to have reached some progress, and we are living in still this time, and I have some lucidity still, not to be complacent about it, but to keep on going and being alert about what is coming up when I still can transform into something called art. That's my talk. Thank you. Thank you.